Hello, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Uh, we're gonna wait for more people to join us, but if you just joined, I just wanna say that if this is your first time using Zoom, you'll see some options at the bottom of your screen. You'll have some options like the chat and the Q&A section. Uh, After or anytime during the presentation, feel free to ask questions through the Q&A section. And if you wanna add any comment that maybe don't necessarily need any answer, please use the chat option. This is a webinar kind of meeting, so you won't be able to see any other participants other than the panelists, and we won't be using the raise hand option. So yeah, we're just gonna wait maybe a couple more minutes for more people to join. In the meantime, I'm just gonna play a quick video for you all. Thank you.
A neighborway is the newest type of street in the city of Pittsburgh. A neighborway is a street where motor vehicle speeds and volumes are kept low to make it more comfortable for existing residents, while also making it safer to walk, ride a bike, and for kids to play. These traffic calming streets provide an alternate route to a major arterial road and have minimal impact on parking and the existing street layout. Whether you drive, walk, roll, or play, your street will be safer and your transportation options will improve. Neighborways create the connections toward a low and abilities bike network. The route will include neighborhood traffic circles, wayfinding, and other traffic calming measures where appropriate.
All right, I see we have 25 participants so far. Let's maybe give a couple more minutes. If you want to say hi to your neighbors, feel free to use the chat option. You can introduce yourself, maybe type in your name and where you're from. If you want to ask questions through the presentation, please use the Q&A section. We'll answer those at the end, and we will not be using the raise hand option this time. I see we already have some people using the chat. So Janet J is asking, why can't everyone see the chat column? Let's see. I wonder if you're using a desktop or a phone, but normally you'll have the chat option at the bottom of your screen. It will look just like this on the screen right now. Let's see. But all right. We still have 29 participants, but I guess we can start if you guys think that's all right. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think we're good to start.
Sounds good. Yeah, why don't you?
And actually, we should introduce ourselves.
Yeah.
I'll start. Hi, everyone. My name is Cassandra Leopold. I'm the principal planner in charge of active transportation with the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure.
I'll go next. Hi, my name is Paige Anderson, and I am on the traffic engineering team at the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure.
I guess I'll go next. Hi, my name is Alyssa Gogenauer. I'm with VHB. I'm a transportation engineer, and I'm here working with DOMI.
Hi, I'm Philip Wu. I'm with the Department of City Planning, and I will be handling the Q&A for this session.
And hi, my name is Ricardo Solis. I work for Healthy Right, but we're helping the city on outreach today. So thank you for joining us.
All right. Well, thank you for everyone for attending tonight's presentation. We'll be going over the North Euclid Neighborway project, but first starting with the review of our pilot. So it'll be the project, then the pilot. Again, my name is Cassandra Leopold. I am the principal planner in charge of active transportation with the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. I wanted to begin our conversation tonight with an overview of our department goals. So the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure, otherwise known as DOMI, is one of the newest departments. And our goal is to provide the physical mobility necessary to support social and economic mobility for the residents of the city of Pittsburgh. And we aim to do so through these 5 goals. Our number 1 goal is always safety. We believe that no one should be seriously injured or killed while using our streets. Second, we care about access. We want to make sure that every resident has access to fresh fruits and vegetables within 20 minutes of their home. And this shouldn't require owning or having access to a car to make that trip. Third, we aim to make all trips less than a mile be easy, enjoyable, and achievable by non-vehicle travel. Not everyone's going to have access to a car, and we want to make sure that there are options available for all residents and visitors to the city of Pittsburgh. Our fourth goal focuses on finance. We want to make sure that the combined cost of housing, transportation, and basic goods do not exceed 45% of someone's income, regardless of how much money you make. DOMI is committed to making sure that there is an affordable option in transportation for our residents and visitors. And finally, we want to make sure our streets for the city of Pittsburgh reflect the pride and values of our residents. Next slide. So, like I said, we're here today to talk about the North Euclid Neighborway project, starting with a review of our pilot. So a lot of DOMI's work, including the conversation we're going to have tonight, has begun in a planning phase. And one of our major planning phases and plans was released last month. That is the 2020 Bike Plus plan. This document is the first plan of its kind for Pittsburgh in 20 years, and that's a huge accomplishment. It proposes over 120 miles of new and improved connections to our bike network. It identifies 27 miles of new trails and supports other policies such as like bike parking and being able to connect better to bike and transit. So I encourage you to go click on the link below to check it out. Slide. So this didn't happen on its own. Initially, the Bike Plus plan is really just talking about what we were doing or having initial plans put out. So it took many years of outreach. Like I said, this is the first time we've had a plan in 20 years. So we really wanted to make a commitment to receive comments and feedback. So we we created 8 public meetings across various neighborhoods throughout the city, and we had thousands and thousands of participants. We really wanted everyone's feedback, and everyone showed up, and it's been great. Slide. So this is a snapshot of our existing bicycle network. You can see we have a lot of major projects going. We do have items like the Allegheny Circle protected bike lanes and Penn Avenue's protected bike lanes. And of course, obviously the wonderful connections of the riverfront trails. But otherwise, the city isn't really connected well. And so the goal of the Bike Plus plan is to make sure, regardless of where you are in the city, you can get safely and comfortably, regardless of your age or ability, and using 2 wheels or 3. Next slide. And so obviously, yes, this is what we're hoping to see for this future of the city of Pittsburgh. This is the proposed Bike Plus network map. So it shows the 120 miles of improved connections. It identifies gaps in the network and recommends specific routes. And mostly it really just improves the sense of connectivity throughout the city. And as always, we want to make sure to connect to existing infrastructure and improve and build upon what we have. So like I was saying before, the plan doesn't give exact details. These are lines that are, will say, oh, we need bike connections here. So what we need and what we're doing right now is the planning process to determine that. And so this is what we're in the middle of and what comes to play. So if you look at the top left of the screen, you see probably the gold standard or premium level of bike facilities. And that is, of course, a shared use path, or as we know it, a trail. And this is usually a completely separated bike facility from automobile traffic, and almost all cyclists, regardless of their age or ability, feel comfortable using it. But as you move through the images, you'll kind of go all the way to the right and eventually to the bottom corner. These are a little bit lighter touch solutions. So we have things like protected bike lanes, which use physical barriers, or buffered bike lanes, which have a painted buffer between the cars and the bicyclists. But probably the most familiar for everyone in the city of Pittsburgh would be the typical bike lane that's throughout the city. We also have sharrows, which indicate a shared lane marking. And then finally, at the bottom right, you see a snapshot of what would be potentially a neighborway. In this case, it's a picture of a speed hump, but it also could include things like a traffic circle and other traffic calming measures. So these are all the different types of tools that DOMI uses to make sure that we can have improved bike connections. Next slide. And finally, we want to talk about Move Forward PGH. This is our brand new campaign. It is the implementation of the Bike Plus plan. It is a collaboration between, obviously, we're working with Bike Pittsburgh and Healthy Ride, but it is first and foremost a city project. We rely on our partners, and we're excited to have them presenting with us tonight. But without them, we are really trying to reach out to the city and all neighborhoods, and so we rely on our partners. But we also make sure to have city staff and engineers always leading our initiatives. We partner with these partners just to say that we have expanded our outreach, and we're doing a combination of grant funding and other sources to pay for this initiative. And please, I see the moveforwardpgh.org at the bottom. Please feel free to check that out. We do have information from the Euclid pilot and eventually the project from today that will be up on the site. And so just talking about today, obviously the Euclid Neighborway project itself, going obviously and starting with the pilot. This is a north-south connection identified by the Bike Plus plan. So that was the lines on a map. This forms important connections for several neighborhoods, East Liberty, Highland Park, and Shady Side. It connects to significant existing and upcoming bike infrastructure. And of course, it really connects the neighborhoods, the residential streets, which is kind of the key. It also connects to many destinations, including businesses, schools, and essential businesses like grocery stores. Next slide. And then just looking at why we chose this facility section of a Neighborway. Euclid has existing low vehicle volume and speed. It achieves a good network and destination connections. That's always key and at the forefront of our mind when considering these kinds of bike infrastructure projects. And it is actually cost effective. It's one of the most cost effective processes we can recommend. And so some of the project improvements we have involved for Euclid are traffic circles, high visibility crosswalks as needed, and then other improvements to the intersections based on safety and improved connectivity, and wayfinding pavement markings and signage. And then this is just a brief overview of our budget for Move Forward PGA projects. So generally the Bike Plus plan and other components were already funded by a larger citywide planning process. But you can see we received a large grant and some in-kind support with over $2 million to fund these recommended projects. You can see planning and construction was funded by city operating budget, and our designs were paid by that grant funding. So this support enables us to hire our designers and then ultimately make the designs. And so with the North Euclid Neighborway project and pilot, we're currently in the design component. We're in the middle of this process and we're moving into to construction, which you'll see during our presentation. We started with planning efforts, and these were the conversations we had when we were putting together the Bike Plus plan map. And then there were public meetings where we took feedback from the community, which helped to launch the Euclid pilot to do more evaluation and research. And now we're moving into the design phase. So tonight, what we're going to share with you is outreach and evaluations done for the pilot, and then share the updated design that incorporates feedback. Our final goal is to make it through to construction. And with that, I will hand it over to Paige.
Hi, everybody. Again, my name is Paige. I'm with the traffic engineering group, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we've been doing to evaluate the pilot that we have been working on. So there's been quite a few components of this, and I'm going to go through all of them. So it is going to be a lot of information all at once, but we wanted to try to be thorough, and of course, we'll take questions at the end. A big component of that was a MyoVision camera. I don't know if you guys spotted it up on, we put it on Callow Hill because part of the reason for our choice in Callow Hill is that's where the Port Authority buses go through. And we also collected speed data. So later on, Alyssa is going to go through the data collection that we did and how we analyzed it. On the 15th, we were able to get some temporary landscaping with the help of your community. So thank you for that. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. And then, you know, from the 10th to the 28th, we are out there doing field visits. So I think I saw a lot of you while I was out there. You probably spotted most of us out there at various points working with various stakeholders to make sure that these traffic circles make a safer, more comfortable condition that is accessible to everybody. During all of these phases, we were collecting feedback to the surveys, which you can see here, and the majority of that has been positive thus far. Next slide, please. So I'm going to go through all of the field visits we did, and they were a lot. The first one that we did was we worked with the snowplows to make sure that they could use these circles. They did, like a lot of these larger vehicles, you know, they did have to go slow and move carefully through the intersections, and they are working to make sure that their routing this year works well so that they can travel easily through these intersections. And still, you know, clear the same amount of snow and keep that access in the winter. So that was a really positive meeting. The next, we met with the Pittsburgh Bureau of Fire. We met with Fire Chief Daryl Jones and tested the traffic circles from all sorts of different angles. They were able to navigate all of the movements. But we also talked about different modifications we could make to, you know, provide them, increase their access. So if you saw the pilot and other materials, they will be concrete in the end. So some of those modifications are increasing the depth of the concrete so they have a little more wiggle room when they're navigating these circles. But again, they were able to navigate all of these pilots without issue. We also are, due to that, one modification we're going to make is within 30 feet of an intersection is already considered illegal parking. It's a state law, and that's to preserve sight lines. But in this case, with the circles, they definitely need that 30 feet to help navigate as larger vehicles. So we are going to be taking further measures to make sure that that is really that law, existing law and those existing no parking zones are made clear to everybody. Next, we actually the very same day, we had a neighborhood walk with many of you in the community. And that was also with Councilwoman Gross and Director Ricks of the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. So that was really positive. I wasn't there for all of it because I was over with Alyssa and I were talking to the fire department, but it sounded like it was a productive meeting and we were able to connect with people there, but also virtually who are interested in had their concerns about the circles and wanted to talk about it more with some of our leadership. Then on the 21st, we met with Pittsburgh Public Schools. They brought out their largest school bus and we tested out all the circles again. You know, like all of these people, they're going to take some time to get used to navigating the circles, but they were able to navigate them. And they are going to work towards the hardest thing to turn, the hardest navigation to make is those left turns. So they're gonna, like the snowplows, they're gonna work to not do left turns at these intersections whenever possible, so that it can be done safely and comfortably for everybody, you know, again, whenever possible. Yep, so that was great. There was many of us at that meeting. Next, we met with a focus group of people with various disabilities and some advocates of theirs, and we talked about how they could navigate a circle. And with the result of that meeting was that we're going to be increasing outreach to make sure that, because this is a totally new tool in our traffic calming toolkit, and a lot of people are still learning how to use it. Obviously, there's some added barriers of how people in these communities use it. So we are going to be doing some increased outreach to make that learning a little bit easier. And we've also decided that we are considering, and I'll talk about this more later, but we're considering adding high visibility crosswalks. And that is for people with low visibility so that we make it, while these are still new infrastructure, we make it, you know, abundantly clear exactly where the safest places to walk are when, as a pedestrian, navigating these intersections. We also sent some video to them, so we're continuing outreach with them to review these things, but that was a really positive meeting for all of us. Yeah, okay. And then our final meeting was just earlier this week. We met with the Port Authority and we watched some buses navigate the Callow Hill intersection, which is where the bus route currently goes. As many of you are aware, I can't speak too much to this project, but the BRT project is proposed to change the route of this corridor within the next few years. But of course, you know, they rely on all the streets in this neighborhood for detour routes as necessary. So, and because these traffic circles are, this pilot is, we're going to be using these traffic circles on other streets, we wanted to be a little more thorough with how we explored that. And again, it was a pretty positive meeting. We did use AutoTurn to design all of these things. So this was just us trying to use these stakeholder visits and these field visits to verify some of our engineering, you know, designs and analysis prior to install. And we've been open to making some changes and have made some changes as a result of these meetings. Next slide, please. So now I'm actually going to give this to Alyssa because she's going to talk a little bit more about data collection.
Okay. Great. So I think I just saw in the chat some discussion about concerns about vehicles being rerouted, you know, possibly onto other streets. One of the things that we're monitoring are both the speed and volume. So we're looking at the speed along Euclid, and we're looking at volumes along Euclid and on neighboring streets as well, so that we can determine, you know, if this is actually deterring traffic on Euclid and, you know, pushing some of that traffic volume onto neighboring streets. I can say that what we know from research is that that is not the case. Other communities that have installed this, certain other types of traffic calming measures have caused traffic to choose a different route. But traffic circles, these neighborhood traffic circles, are not one of those treatments. And so, you know, what we found right now, we want to take a little bit more time to investigate the volume data and see how this compares, in particular because of the changes with COVID. You know, I know that all of us are aware that there's a variety of kind of traffic patterns going on with, you know, some people returning back to work, but also just a general increase in traffic in general. So we are monitoring that right now. Speed data, I want to talk about a little bit about what we found so far on speeds. And that is that everyone has been traveling from where we've been recording speeds below the speed limit. In particular, so Euclid at Callow Hill showed average speeds of 19 miles per hour. So the vast majority traveled through below the speed limit. We're also recording at Packaway, showing that average speeds of 21 miles per hour. So we're keeping an eye on these. Again, you know, the intent of these traffic circles is to help improve safety within those intersections and to reduce crash types. And we want to make sure that that people weren't using the traffic circles and able to increase their speeds along the corridor. And so far, we haven't seen this. I will say going forward as well, what we expect is there to be a reduction in speeds from these, or for them to possibly stay about the same. They work best when they are installed in a series, and as you know, they're planned for other intersections that haven't been installed as part of the pilot. So we only expect that to improve over time. But we are going to keep monitoring this. We want to make sure that they're still working and as intended. All right, so we can go to the next slide. So I want to get into a little bit about the camera data that we've recorded here. So, so we have data so far at Callow Hill and Euclid. We wanted to understand how these circles were being used. You know, we had heard anecdotally that about people maybe not using the circle as intended, or possibly some confusion around it. And so we wanted to take a look and see who was actually using the circle. You know, were they using it correctly, and what types of behaviors we could see. So the recording that we looked at, the first one is from a 24-hour period on a Wednesday. It was before the splitter was installed. And we are recording information from after the splitter was installed as well. It was also recorded with the old signs in place, so the keep right signs. We have it for most days, but not every day, from 7:09 through 7:21 at this intersection, because we had to take down the battery to recharge it. So most days of the week. This intersection in particular does not have the crosswalks here, but the reason why we had selected this one is because of the bus use at this intersection, and we wanted to make sure to see, you know, if anything had been hit within the intersection, could we tell what hit it in particular? Was this working for the Port Authority buses? So I'll talk about how we're going to change that later, but for now we'll talk about the findings here at this intersection. All right, so go to the next slide. So again, you can see in the image here, this is one of the articulated buses who was able to comfortably make it through the intersection. So again, we want to basically generally get the idea is that how is this circle working? Who is using it? And is there anything that would lead us to maybe make a change within the design? So go to the next slide. All right, so the date of the observation that we took was July 15th, so that was a Wednesday. We wanted to pick a day where we also weren't doing any of our other field visits with special vehicle types out there. So the majority of the types of users were personal vehicles. There are quite a few pedestrians that passed through this intersection, 194 within that 24-hour period. But you can see there's a wide variety of vehicle types. So in particular, we split out work vehicles. We had maybe heard anecdotally that vehicles for certain businesses, such as landscapers, that they would find it challenging to use the intersections. We can see that a lot of them have used it. Buses, large trucks, emergency vehicles, street cleaners. So a pretty wide variety of different types of users. So just keep that in mind. In total, the traffic volume within this intersection was 1,208 was the total vehicle count for the day. And that does include pedestrians and bicyclists. All right, so go ahead. All right, so as far as use of the circle itself, 98% of people going through the intersection used it correctly, and 22 or 2% did not use it correctly. I think this is pretty good. Typically for research, we would leave a 3-month period for people to get acclimated to a new type of treatment. So this was not that long after installation. So I think that's pretty good. And also the fact that there were no splitter islands installed just yet, I'm going to imagine that when we go back and look at data with the splitter islands, that number of the incorrect use will likely go down. In terms of near, incidences, we also just wanted to generally look at the data and say, from a safety perspective, were there any crashes that weren't recorded within crash data? Were there any near misses, or did everyone travel through it smoothly? So, 99.8% of the people who had gone through the intersection had no incident at all. We recorded personally 3 near misses. I should note that 2 of the 3, the people involved did not seem to respond at all. So that was just merely our observation that we felt that they were close to each other, the 2 different modes. But they clearly weren't worried about it enough to react within the video. And only one could be, we thought, it definitely was a near miss involving 2 vehicles, but again, they didn't hit each other, and one kind of stopped and the other one kept going. And so they were able to resolve it. Did the near misses involve pedestrians? Yes, 2 of them involved pedestrians, but again, in neither of those instances did the pedestrian react. So, while I say that they are near misses that involve pedestrians, that was merely our judge from the angle of the camera, but they didn't react at all. So I think that, they probably didn't feel that uncomfortable by it. And one of those was a pedestrian in a bus, and one was a pedestrian in a car. And again, in all of those instances, they just traveled on as normal and did not, the pedestrian didn't visibly react in the video. But we wanted to be a little bit conservative in terms of what we were capturing and saying, is that too close for us? Is there anything else that we should change as a result of it? Okay, so in terms of use of that circle, so that 22 or that 2%, I'd like to go back to that one. So most of that involved vehicles that were making a left in front of the circle. And I think that's probably not surprising for any of you who live along the corridor or, you know, seen other vehicles do this maneuver. Um, and so we tried to take a look at that and see, you know, is there something that we should do about this? And we are going to look back now that the splitter island has been installed and see if there's been any changes since then. But, you know, overall with 98% correct use, we're fairly happy with that so far. So could we go to the next slide? All right, so we do have video captures that we have recorded personally of anything that involved a vehicle using the circle incorrectly, or any type of near miss, you know, anything like that that we were concerned about that warranted a second look. And so, but this is typical of what we found as far as someone using the intersection incorrectly. It's a vehicle that is making a left in front of the circle. I did want to show one screenshot, which I thought was pretty funny. So Ricardo, if you go to the next slide. I don't know if this was any of you, but someone was clearly enjoying the circle at night and drove about 10 laps around the circle before exiting it successfully. So we just kind of thought that was amusing to find late at night with the circle. So okay, so let's go on to what we're going to collect next. So for the video recordings, so we do have data, additional data at Callow Hill that was for after these splitter islands were installed. But for now, we have moved the camera over to Hampton. And we want to see how people are using that intersection with the crosswalks installed, to see if we find any different findings there in terms of behaviors, especially given the feedback that the ADA community provided regarding how the marked crosswalks helped low vision pedestrians navigate through the intersection. So, so right now we're recording data there, and we're going to process that for another 24 hours and compare it. We are also collecting additional speed data throughout the corridor. And we're collecting additional traffic volume data along North Euclid and also on neighboring streets. So this is going to continue. It's an ever-evolving process where we want to monitor the situation. All right, so you can go to the next slide. So now I want to touch on the landscaping a bit. I think you guys have probably all seen this. It has been a really nice addition, in my mind, to the circles that are out there. And so thanks to all of you that helped with that. So, you know, this involved gathering donated materials and support, you know, for the first half of July. Soil was provided by the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy. Flowers were donated by Bidwell. Pittsburgh Parks donated the pots. And then the maintenance and planting were donated by the Highland Park Community Group and residents. And then on the 18th, they were installed. So thank you for all of you that took part in that to help with your volunteering. You know, they look beautiful. And in the future, we are also, you know, going to be planning for that long-term landscaping of the circles. So you can go to the next slide. All right, so, you know, just a close-up of some of the flowers that are out there. All right, thank you. So Ricardo, do you want to talk about the poll? I don't know, it just popped up for me.
Yeah, so I'm just sharing this poll. I'll share another poll after the presentation, but this one is more about us wanting to know where you guys live and how do you hear about this meeting. But yeah, thank you.
Cool. I'm going to jump in now and start to talk a little bit more about what this project will look like as we move forward, as we transition from this pilot phase and into final construction of the Neighborway. So I think I hope a lot of you have seen this, this or a similar map to this. Just again going over what the initial proposal was, and that was to have these seven traffic circles in the corridor And you'll see that we had 4 of them piloted. And those are the ones that we have been observing and talking about these while, but there are actually 3 others that we are proposing in the final Neighborway. So it will be a much more consistent corridor. Usually that from research that we've looked at other cities, that means that we see increased compliance, and we do see further decreased speeds as it becomes, a more robust and consistent corridor. Next slide, please. So one of the biggest considerations that we are considering right now, this is where we want to talk to all of you. So one of the things you may have noticed is that a few weeks in, we changed the signs at, I've seen some people in the chat talking about this. We changed the signs at, oh, I'm sorry that the captions are incorrect. I did not fix them, my bad. But we changed the signs at 2 of the intersections. So sign A, we have up on Callowhill and Hampton. And then the other ones we have at Hayes and Rippey, which is sign B. So we put up sign B, and we heard some people make some suggestions as to more clear and more legible signage. It's difficult to find, past research about which signage is best. This is something that if we look at the dozens and dozens of cities in the United States that have traffic circles, there isn't a lot of consistency in there because there are many options. So we just wanted to get a feel from you all. Talking about legibility, that's really just something you kind of feel in a gut instinct. So I think Ricardo's going to launch a poll now where we can hear what you guys think about which of these signs you prefer, because we will pick one and use it consistently through this corridor, but also through other corridors in the city. So I'm just going to give you guys a little bit of time. So do that.
Option A is winning so far.
It has been interesting anecdotally. I've had conversations with many of you, and I do think it's something that surprised me is how many people will say, I've heard a few people say gut instinct, A is way clearer, and then, vice versa, the complete opposite from other people. So it is something that's a little bit torn. And I do think it is something that's a little bit cultural, perhaps. I will say in the very few traffic circles we already have in the city, there's one at Reynolds and Homewood. They do have option B installed there, but I don't think that they were doing a lot of data collection to decide that. Okay, wow, option A is winning. Okay, good to know, thanks guys. So other things that we are looking into making changes about and considering adapting. And I guess I'll further say too, a lot of this is a very living project, although we have to move from the pilot phase of the temporary 4 circles to this construction of concrete circles, 7 of them. A lot of different things like signage and any kind of, smaller details like that are easily adaptable, and even pavement markings. So we'll see those change throughout time, and we're going to keep our eye on this and be very willing to make changes in the future. So some of those signage changes that you can anticipate now based on our initial feedback is some adjustments to signage height to make sure it's a little clearer in the pedestrian way on the sidewalks and for people traveling near where we install this signage. So we're going to make some adjustments to that. As I spoke to earlier, based on feedback from the Port Authority and Pittsburgh Bureau of Fire, we are going to be putting up no parking signs to further reinforce the already illegal no parking areas and maintain that access for larger vehicles more easily. Similarly, we are going to be adding some advanced warning signs. These won't be throughout the corridor, but rather at the intersections that are along more sloped areas of the roadway. So Callowhill right now, and I think Elgin will be included in that. And that's just because as you travel, we've heard feedback that as you travel up these more sloped intersections, you can't see the circles from the same distance that you would if it was flat. So we just want to make sure that everyone knows that they are ahead. And then similarly, we will be adding some no truck signage to the beginning and end of the corridor. Of course, the way that these laws work, local vehicles are still allowed to access Euclid. We can't prohibit that, but we will be discouraging use from large vehicles along this corridor. And then Alyssa already spoke about this, and I even spoke about it too, but we are collecting more data around the crosswalks at Hampton right now. And there's a few reasons we are going to be adding crosswalks. And that is primarily due to people with low visibility, giving them a lot of more knowledge about where it is that is safest for them to be walking and through these intersections. But similarly, we are using the Hampton data to help verify if it does also increase people to yield more consistently. And if they do, this is something that we're going to be including with crosswalks throughout the city, not just on Euclid. So again, we really appreciate you guys letting us do this pilot on your street. We've learned a lot of information and made a lot of adjustments already, but of course, again, these are living projects and we'll be continuing to make adjustments into the future. One other current consideration that we are looking into is PWSA has announced that they are going to be doing a lot of work on Euclid. I think a lot of you can already see the spray paint in the street. They came to us and they told us that they are going to be working to get rid of some lead line replacement, which is of course good news, and we don't want to get in the way of that in their way in any way by installing some of this new infrastructure. So we are going to be considering some interim solutions that we can do at some of these 3 of these intersections. We aren't entirely sure what those will look like. We can follow back up with some of the community groups to let them know once we have an idea. But this should just be for the first year. And then we are looking at being able to install them more consistently with the concrete circles that you'll be seeing at the other intersections. And so just to wrap it up and follow back on some of these timelines and talk about where we are in this process, we began with some community stakeholder outreach. We've been doing that for many, many months now. And then we had that went on for a while. This was born of not only the Bike Plus plan, but concerns we got from people on this street about speeding. So that's been, and I know some of those concerns go back many, many years. But we did have our first public meeting about it just over a month ago. And then in July, we did all of our data collection and field visits and stakeholder outreach as early as this week. And of course, that doesn't end. And now we're looking at final installation for these concrete circles, and you can expect that in mid-August. I do believe we will be sending out another round of postcards that says changes are coming to your street, giving a little more details on when those can be expected. But right now, mid-August is looking like the time you will start to see some of these further changes.
All right, thank you so much for that, Paige. We are going to move ahead to the Q&A section. We'll answer as many questions as we can. I just want to remind you really quick, please use the Q&A option for you to have your questions answered instead of the chat. I see some of you have been already asking your questions through the chat. If you could please maybe copy paste that into the Q&A, that would be great. And if for some reason we don't have enough time since the meeting finishes at 7 p.m., we'll email you the reply to your question for sure. So yeah, thank you.
Additionally too, I'm just going to comment that there is that Move Forward PGH website that we mentioned earlier. On those pages, there is a frequently asked questions tab, and we are adding to that as we get more questions. So you can also follow up there.
Yeah, that's true. Thanks for that. And also the recording of the meeting and the presentation will be shared with you via email as well.
All right, so we have about 15 minutes for questions, and we will start at the top. Why haven't this is from Sarah. Why haven't the East Liberty intersections of Hayes and Euclid and Rippey and Euclid received the same roundabout signs that the Highland Park Neighborway has?
Sure. I think I went through this in one of the slides, but I'm happy to talk about it again. That is because we were trying to test it out. So they will be consistent, and it looks like option A is taking the cake. So they will be consistent with the ones up at Callow Hill and Hampton.
Kat asks, to be clear, were the exercises for the large vehicles, I believe the fire truck, only done at Callow Hill?
No.
Paige, maybe I could answer that one a little
Yeah,
bit
go for
because
it.
I was in the vehicle with the fire department, and we tested out all of the circles. We drove the whole corridor, and then we actually drove around some other places in the area and came back. We tested different movements within the circles. So we didn't just test going through it, we tested making rights and lefts. I think someone had noted that the fire truck does have to move slow, and that is very true. They do have to move slow on most of our intersections, whether there is a circle there or not. And in fact, they had said that one of the biggest obstacles for them are parked vehicles and different poles that are alongside the road. You know, I think with some of the parking restrictions, just the noting where the legal parking is within the intersection should help not only with safety within the intersection, but also for things such as emergency vehicle access. So they were able to make every single movement, and the two intersections where we weren't able to make turns in one movement and actually had to back up and back, we're off of this corridor and we're on two neighboring streets without circles that were of similar sizes. So, so they were able to do it, but during the whole time we got to talk about, you know, their challenges, what would help them to be able to navigate it better so we can make sure our designs work for them.
So the next question, Anonymous says that some vehicles have been able to manage the circle without slowing down. Now that the stop signs have been removed, some vehicles are not slowing down for the yield sign. Are there any plans to make it harder for cars to keep their speed through the traffic circle?
Yeah, Paige, do you want me to answer this one?
Yeah,
Or
go for it.
and add on if I miss anything.
Yeah,
So right now, the way those the current circles are laid out, the curb will actually be at where the painted line is, and then there will be a painted line out from that. So it's visually going to be a little bit more narrow, but we wanted to place this pilot as it was so we could make sure that it works for all of the important larger vehicles to be able to navigate the circle before doing that just slightly larger installation, which they will be able to navigate as well based on everything that we've tested with them in person and through our software. So this should help with additional traffic calming within the intersection itself. And as I had mentioned before, they work best when they're installed in a series. So we think that should help both with the speeds within the intersections, but then also along the corridor. As of right now, the speeds haven't been increased, but I do understand the concern as you know, you're traveling through that intersection and the speeds that they're going there. So it's something that we're looking at, but I think that the that size that we are moving up to, it's definitely people are going to have to slow down going through it.
Just to add on to that too, I'll say that what the goal of these is like a traffic calming tool is, you know, it is, if there was a huge speeding problem, we probably would have chosen speed humps, but we did see in some of the early data that the biggest concern and talking to the community was actually these intersections. So what we're trying to do is, you know, make those outliers that are going the fastest, really force them to slow down. So I know speed is a tough thing to perceive, you know, visually, but we are, because there is a physical barrier, you know, we are kind of taking those worst case scenarios and bringing those speeds down the most, you know, the people that would fly through a stop sign regardless. So the goal is to really get those speeds down for the most extreme cases. And that is, you know, what we've seen in research with what traffic circles do.
And actually now I'll add one more last thing
Go
to
for
what
it,
you said
yeah.
is that also with the crosswalks, when we look back at that video data and the yielding to people within a crosswalk, you know, just anecdotally, and observing these, I've been out there a lot. And so I know that quite a few have seen us out there just in general. And so I know that there are definitely concerns about yielding and, you know, pedestrians being able to cross at locations without marked crosswalks, even though those are legal crossing locations, and drivers are to yield to pedestrians within unmarked crosswalks. But we know that that's not really a well-known fact, and yielding is an issue. And so I think having the marked crosswalks at where the circles are installed will help with that as well.
All right, next question. Have human factor experts have been involved in any of these studies? For example, how does a driver first encountering a traffic circle interpret and implement that fact that the driver has to first turn to the right to satisfy the goal of turning left?
Yeah, so good, you know, it's an interesting question. I think it's something that I tend to think about a lot. I do a lot of research myself, and part of the National Academies of Science, where these are the types of things that we investigate quite often. That isn't something that we would necessarily study for this corridor very specifically for many reasons, including the time that it would take to study it and the amount of data that we would need to do to actually produce a robust study. You know, but thankfully that is something that is taken into consideration by the Federal Highway Administration when they develop the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices. And they go through really rigorous procedures in order to develop that, including human factors and testing it in the laboratory and in the field. So so that has been tested by others, and that is also why certain signage are authorized and within that manual, and we follow that manual whenever we're doing the design as a result. So the signs out there, you could say, in theory, you know, have been through that process, but we're not going to test them ourselves for a human factors type study.
Mel has a question about speed data, if there's any speed data between Hayes and East Liberty Boulevard.
I am going to check Hayes and East Liberty. I think the answer to that is no, we have not yet. We actually, we have many cameras up there, and we are planning on kind of rotating through them. We have very limited supply, and we use all these same limited supply of cameras and manpower, and we use this data for a lot of things. So we had to kind of be pick and choose. We are planning on like moving these throughout the corridor as we come back and check on the speeds and how they are, you know, working.
But I think there have been a lot of comments on here and related to that and collecting some of that data on that end of the corridor. And I think that's a fair assessment, and that's something that we're going to do as well. So we can certainly take a look at moving some of these down to collect additional data to help make sure that there's consistency along the corridor in terms of how people are behaving or using it.
Abe's question is if piano key crosswalks yield to pedestrian signs will be installed with all the traffic circles.
So yeah, I think I spoke to this a little bit earlier. I do think we are planning to install piano key crosswalks at all of the circles based on feedback with our stakeholders in this past month. The yield signs as of right now are going to remain as they are for this initial iteration. Yield applies to both pedestrians and to vehicles. And we think that the crosswalks will help make that clear. But again, you know, this is a living project, and we can certainly make further adjustments when we install all of these consistent piano key crosswalks throughout the corridor. If we feel as though that's something that we can improve upon, we will consider it.
Leanne asks, what training will be done for children and crossing guards before the opening of Fulton Elementary for the fall?
Cassandra, do you want to answer that one with the Safe Routes to School coordinator?
Oh, absolutely. I'm sorry, my computer overheated, so I automatically signed off whether I liked it or not. So I'm now on a separate computer. My apologies. Yes, so we have our Safe Routes to School coordinator, Harriet. She is working with 3 pilot schools now, so a lot of what we're doing, even if working on, virtually on these very unprecedented times, we will be doing, working with crossing guards, working with parents and children, just to really talk about what's being improved and traffic calming around intersections. I think also we'll be including crossing guards in that education. And so there's a lot of virtual content that is being created to get kids interested and also encourage them to walk with their families and consider those traffic calming measures independently of school activities. So it's an amazing project during really difficult times, but families and children around the schools will be considered and engaging with that area.
Phil, before you continue.
Yeah, just about
Yep, sorry. I just wanted to say that we have 5 more minutes left, so maybe we could answer maybe a couple more questions, and just reminding everybody again that if we couldn't answer your question, you'll get your answer via email.
All right, next question is from Sarah. How will you monitor the increase in large vehicles on the neighboring streets?
I would say that in part that'll be through the traffic volume monitoring that we do on both on Euclid and on some of the neighboring streets to see if there's a change. I think I saw in some of the comments about, some people definitely feeling like there are heavy vehicles, an increase in heavy vehicles. So I think that's something that we'll take a look at. I do think that a lot of folks are having an increase in heavy vehicles just due to the amount of construction that was kind of pent up and is happening. So it might be hard for us to tell right away whether that's a result of the traffic circles or things reopening and, the period of construction season right now.
Joshua has a question. Can you please clarify what we have in terms of a say for these? Can we reject a circle on their block, or is it there to stay no matter what?
I can give a stab at this. So we are installing, we are planning on going forward based on our data of installing these. They will exist unless we see otherwise that we are, having issues with it that are regards to safety or access. But again, these streets, well, I understand a lot of, people who we live on the streets and we feel that these are, this is public right of way, and we are using them to create connections that are, important to the entire community around them. So that is what we got from the Bike Plus plan, and that is why we are moving forward with this connection, is to create something that is, important to the people that live on it, but also benefits the communities around it as well.
Andrea asked, does DOMI have the authority to recommend updating north-south neighborhood streets to one-way and or parking on one side only?
This is something, I'm not sure exactly what this looks like. It would be within DOMI's jurisdiction. I do know that to make to switch your road to one-way requires a petition of local neighbors in addition to recommendation and approval from the municipal traffic engineer, which is not me, that is my boss. And so that would be, is something we can consider on any given street, and that, but it is something that needs to be signed off by property owners. I believe it's property owners along those routes before we could make any changes to the operations in terms of directions of travel on a right of way.
Looks like we may have time for one more question. This one is from Cassandra. What will the station and Euclid intersection look like once the two-way conversion happens? How would someone get into the Neighborway coming from Negley or Penn?
I am not super familiar with the URA Station Square project, but I do believe it only affects Station Square. So you can access Euclid from both directions now, rather than only from the, traveling the right direction with the way it currently exists. But it does not change access to Euclid. It only, increases access to Euclid. And I will say, as we look forward to that project, you know, there is, of course, the possibility of increased volume on Euclid because of that two-way connection. So we are hoping that these traffic circles will help to, you know, discourage any additional volumes, and additionally make sure that any people that are using Euclid as a result of that, those changes from the URA, that they are traveling through the corridor safely.
All right, I think we're up to, it's already 7 p.m. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. As I mentioned in the chat, I'll be sending you an email with not only the presentation, but also the video of this meeting, and all the questions that we were not able to answer live, we'll answer to you via email as well. So thank you so much, and thank you, team, for presenting.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great night, guys.
Bye.